Welcome. Today, we're going to crack open the world of economics, and we're going to do it by giving you the essential toolkit from a first-year university course, without the student loans.
I mean, have you ever really stopped to think about that? These questions affect us every single day, from the price of your coffee to the big headlines about the nation's economy. And the answers? Well, they lie in just a few core principles.
Yep, that's what we're doing. We've got our hands on a real university syllabus, and we're going to break down the most important ideas slide by slide. Think of this as your personal user's guide to the economic world that's buzzing all around you.
Okay, so where do we even begin? Let's start small. We'll look at the economics of you, me, and individual businesses. This is the world of microeconomics.
So what is microeconomics, really? Well, think of it like this. It's all about studying the individual trees, not the entire forest. It's the how and why behind your choices, a single company's strategy, and how all those little everyday decisions add up to shape the market.
And it all, and I mean all of it, starts with two huge fundamental forces, demand and supply. Seriously, these two words are the absolute bedrock of a market economy. They're in this constant dance, a push and pull, that decides the price of pretty much everything you can think of.
So let's talk about demand. It's not just about, wanting something. It's about being willing and, crucially, able to pay for it. And there's a really simple rule here called the law of demand that explains the relationship between price and just how much we want to buy.
And this table? It's a perfect example of that law in action. We pulled this straight out of a university textbook. Just look at it. As the price drops from 80 rupees to 60 and then down to 40, what happens? The quantity people want to buy goes up. It's this perfect inverse relationship. Price goes down, demand goes up. Simple, right?
So you've got people like us wanting our coffee. That's demand. And you've got the cafes ready to sell it. That's supply. When those two forces meet, right at that point where the amount we want to buy perfectly matches the amount they want to sell, well, that's called equilibrium. That is the magic spot that sets the price. But how do we actually make those choices? I mean, picture yourself in a store, staring at two different brands of basically the same thing. What's actually going on in your head at that moment? Well, economics has a word for that. And that word is utility. It sounds a bit technical, but the idea is super simple. We're all just trying to get the most satisfaction or utility that we can. We're constantly, maybe even subconsciously, weighing our options and picking the one that we think will give us the most bang for our buck, the most happiness. All right, let's flip the coin for a second. We've talked about us, the consumers. What about the businesses? For them, pretty much every decision boils down to one thing, managing their costs. But here's the thing, not all costs are what they seem.
And this slide lays it out perfectly. You've got two kinds of costs. On one hand, explicit costs. These are the obvious ones, the actual money you pay for rent, salaries, materials, the stuff that shows up in the accounting books. But then you have implicit costs. These are the sneaky ones, the opportunity costs. For example, if a small business owner could be earning a six-figure salary working for someone else, that lost salary is an implicit cost of running their own business. Accountants might ignore it, but economists, they look at both.
Okay, so we've been looking at the individual trees. Now it's time to zoom out. Way out, and look at the entire forest. Welcome to the world of macroeconomics. So, if micro is all about your personal wallet, macroeconomics is about the entire country's wallet. This is where we tackle the really big questions. Why do recessions happen? What's causing inflation? How does an entire nation get wealthier over time? And maybe the single most important idea in all of macroeconomics is something you've definitely heard of: GDP, or Gross Domestic Product. At its core, it's the main way we measure the total economic output of a country. Just think of it as the nation's total income for the year.
Now, this table, it might look a little intimidating. It's actually a real example from an economics exam showing how national income gets calculated. You see all these complex terms, right? Gross fixed capital formation, net exports. But don't get bogged down in the details. All these numbers are just pieces of a giant puzzle that add up to that one big score, the GDP. It's basically the final grade on a country's annual economic report card.
So if the economy is this huge, complex machine, you might be wondering, who's in the driver's seat? Well, there are actually two main drivers, and each one has its own set of controls to either speed things up or, slow them down when needed. First up, you have fiscal policy. This is the government's toolkit. They control government spending and taxation. Then you have monetary policy. That's the job of the central bank.
And their tools are the money supply and interest rates. And this separation, it's a really big deal. It's designed to keep politics and the printing of money separate, which, trust me, is a good thing for avoiding economic chaos. It's all about checks and balances.
And each of those toolkits really has two main settings, a go pedal and a slow pedal. When the economy is in a slump, they use expansionary policies. That's like hitting the gas to get things moving again. But if the economy is running too hot and causing prices to spike, they use contractionary policies. That's them tapping the brakes to cool things down.
So how does the central bank actually hit that gas pedal? Well, let's take a look. As you can see here, one way is for the central bank to buy up government securities from private banks. This floods those private banks with cash. Now that they're flush with cash, what do? They can lend out more money, which pushes interest rates down. And when borrowing is cheaper, what do? We spend. Businesses invest, consumers buy things, and the whole economy gets a boost.
All right, we've talked about the small picture, microeconomics, our individual choices. And we've talked about the big picture, macroeconomics, the national policies. But the real question is, how do they connect? Where do they meet?
Well, think about the last time you bought something big. Let's say a new phone.
Your decision, which brand to buy, how much you were willing to spend, which store you went to, that whole process was a classic microeconomic decision. It was all about your personal budget and what gave you the most utility. But, and this is the magic link, when you multiply your single choice by millions of other people making similar choices, it suddenly becomes a macroeconomic event. It actually moves the needle on national statistics like consumption and investment, and it directly affects that big national report card we talked about, the GDP. You see, micro and macro aren't separate things. They're just two sides of the very same coin.
So there you have it. From the basics of supply and demand to the big levers of fiscal and monetary policy, you now have the fundamental toolkit of a first-year economics student. So, the next time you see a headline about interest rates changing or just wonder why gas prices are what they are, you'll have a brand new framework to see the hidden forces at play. Thanks for joining me.